Ons gesels vandag met Peter Searll en ons gesels oor biomimicry. Peter, welcome to Groot Plaas.
Thanks, Mia. Lovely to be here.
First of all, tell me, what exactly is biomimicry?
Biomimicry is a way that we can learn from nature, who's had 4 billion years and an unlimited budget to solve many of the problems that we face today. Essentially, the idea is to create the conditions conducive to life. How do we apply these simple life principles to make sure that we can solve our ecological and many other challenges that we face, including industrial design issues like water flow, overheating, how to create systems that operate optimally according to natural principles. So it's just a way that we can learn and copy from nature to make sure that we do things that are life-enforcing rather than destructive.
How can this be to the advantage of agriculture?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. I think that, we believe very strongly in regenerative agriculture and that this is the ultimate application for biomimicry. So one of the key principles of biomimicry is to use life-friendly chemistry. So, we use so many synthetic chemicals that are destroying our soil food web, that are poisoning our water supplies. Look at the massive insect loss. And the most important aspect is that this translates into human health. All the chemicals that we put into the soil ultimately come back to us when we eat the food. So by ensuring that we use life-friendly chemistry, we can, reduce the amount of chronic illness and disease that we're seeing around the world. Principles like integrating development with growth, so that as we develop some soil and we develop our land, we make sure that it's aligned with natural principles to be optimally efficient.
Now, I want to know about the practical implications. Give me a few examples, especially when it comes to, how it can make farmers' lives these days a bit easier.
I wish there was some silver bullets for farming, but, it's never a short-term process. Like nature never hurries, and as we know, farmers, you need lots of patience. So, one of the key things about regenerative agriculture is really to build the soil food web. And this requires us to understand that soil is actually a living entity. And what this means is that all the life in the soil is what's responsible for the symbiotic relationship between plants. So when you have a healthy soil, you can have much healthier food. And the soil will be much more productive. So, if we're looking at the microbial and the fungal life below the soil, this is the source of resilience and of nutrition. The fungi act like a second set of roots. If you've got a healthy soil food web and you need some nutrition in the soil that's over there and your plant is over here, the plants communicate with the fungus and the microbes in the soil, and they can share nutrition across quite a large area. So practically for farmers, if we think about building that soil food web underneath the ground, then it makes the soil much more productive and we can grow anything.
Give me a big picture of how did your passion for biomimicry and the industry you're in, how did it start?
I was privileged enough to go and do a biomimicry workshop in Bali with my late cousin, Dan Schreiber, who was a great visionary, and the brilliant Claire Yanish, who passed away 2 years ago. She was a chemical engineer and got into biomimicry. And I started, I'm a researcher by background, and I like to understand things, and I like to try and solve problems in the most resource-efficient way. And resource efficiency actually is another biomimicry principle. The seeds were planted in Bali, and then I got in generating life-friendly chemistry, new generation fertilizers. And then it became quite a challenge because there's such a deep, entrenched commitment to NPK, not only in this country, but around the world. And sadly, the NPK chemicals are actually destroying our soil productivity. They contribute to CO2 emissions. And these are great big global problems. And following the work of Dr. Zach Bush quite a lot, he's the most brilliant man. If you haven't come across his work, I really would suggest having a look at it. And he shows the relationship of soil health to human health. So, trying to solve all of these very complex and multidimensional issues led me along this path of regenerative agriculture. And I think that biomimicry principles can help us leverage the way that we go about making small but subtle and yet powerful changes to the way that we think about our soil, moving from a dominate and control perspective to working with nature and aligning with natural principles. It's the most resource-efficient strategy. It's best for our human health, for the environmental health, for our water. And for me, it's a really
it's
big
just
passion.
All in all good.
That's the amazing thing about it.
Peter, just give me a second. We are just going for a break now. Bly ingeskakel, ons is nou terug. Ek gesels met Peter Searll en ons gesels oor biomimicry. Now, Peter, tell me about the principles of biomimicry.
Okay, there are 6 life principles, and I think there are 4 that are probably the most relevant for today's discussion. The first one is to be locally attuned and responsive. Now, this is really important, and it does mean that we need to think about our environment in different ways. A solution that works in one area or region may not necessarily work because of the different environmental conditions, including the microbial life in the soil. So, for example, in Korean natural farming and the Japanese jadam farming, they cultivate local microbes that have developed and have evolved to be perfect for those specific conditions. So by using those in your composting, you are encouraging the naturally evolved life that's in that specific zone to be up. So it does require a different kind of thinking rather than just saying, I've got soil that I'm just going to use as a chemical factory. If I can understand what's going on locally, I can be much more efficient and effective in what I'm doing. So that's the one, being locally attuned and responsive. Another principle, which I've already mentioned, is use life-friendly chemistry. Now, nature recycles everything. Nothing goes to waste. If you're using harsh chemicals that can't be recycled, then you create a problem. So life-friendly chemistry is about ways of encouraging life below ground and above ground, and that impacts broadly across the well-being of humans, of the environment, of animals, of everything else. So that's a really important one. And given the high price of fertilizers as we started this conversation, if once we start composting and using life-friendly chemistry in our soil, we're going to get much more vibrant and healthy soil. And the beautiful thing is that we actually can grow soil. We can create it. It's not just a finite resource. So if we understand that soil is living, that's just a very powerful place for us to be. So again, it's a mind shift change that needs to happen. Another principle is to integrate development with growth. So this means that as you build areas in your farm and you're developing them, if they move towards a growth cycle, then it's the most resource efficient strategy is to integrate growth. So those are some of the key principles that we really focus on in terms of applying biomimicry to regenerative agriculture.
How does a farmer start the process? If somebody is looking at the program and thinking, oh, I want to try that, where do they start? The first thing.
the first thing, you've got to have a plan. You've got to think about what you're trying to achieve, because, like I say, there isn't a quick fix. And if you think about a transition from current synthetic chemical farming to a more organic-based farming, it takes about 3 years before your soil will get back to that same level of productivity that you're having with all the chemicals. But then it's an increasing curve. So you've got to start with a plan. One of the key things about this is animal integration, livestock integration. So, monoculture is not a natural principle at all. Nature doesn't like monoculture. It diminishes resilience. So it depends also on what you're farming. You should never, ever leave your soil uncovered. I think that's probably the first point to start with.
Step one.
Yeah, always make sure that there's something living on the soil. That keeps the soil alive, both above and below ground. And you can't have one without the other. So if you think about the Great Plains and the savannas, the huge migrating herds of animals that come in and drop their dung and their urine and scratch it up, that's one of the key ways of keeping soil healthy and encouraging that microbial and life, and as well as adding biomass. So animal integration is key. Cover cropping, absolutely essential. And then diversity of your plant species. That also helps to build your resilience and can also bring you different income from different cash crops. So you've got to think about it. It does require a mindset that you've got to think about what you're trying to achieve, rather than just saying, oh, I need so many kilograms of nitrogen and phosphorus.
We've got just under a minute left. What is the alternative?
Well, the alternative is we can continue down this path of destroying our soils chemically, and that will destroy our environment and our human well-being. And the longer we leave it, the more it's going to take to fix it. So for me, there is no really alternative. We've got to start thinking about how we can regenerate our soil and our well-being.
Peter, thank you for having a chat with me. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Mia. It's been a real pleasure.
Ek hoop dit was vir jou opvoedkundig en ons gesels later verder weer oor hierdie belangrike onderwerp.